What's up, everyone? Welcome back to the Progressive Gentleman Podcast. I'm your host, Dan.
I'm Matt.
And we'd like to thank you for taking the time to nerd out about music with us. If you're listening to us on Spotify, if you're listening to us on Apple Podcast, Google Podcast, whatever you're listening to us on, go ahead, click that like, follow, subscribe button. We really appreciate it. Also, we want to let you know this episode's brought to you by Eargasm Earplugs. Go to eargasm.com, use code Gentleman10 for a discount, and protect your hearing this year. I feel like it's a good year to start if you haven't started already. We got a new one for you today. A decade of jams is what we're calling this. And basically what we're going to do is we're going to look at every year starting from 2010 to 2019. So the 2010's. As it was, that's what we call that.
Good year for decade, not year.
Good decade, yes.
For music.
And we're basically going to look at each year and try to come up with a record that kind of was the biggest standout record for us in that given year. It was hard. We started sort of looking through and pulling a couple out. There were a couple years where, I don't even know. I'm not even super comfortable with the record we chose.
Yeah, we had to choose one, and it was tough.
Yeah, this was a challenge. If this one goes well, even if it doesn't go well, I feel like honestly, the albums that we chose through this decade are going to be kind of obvious-ish for us if you've listened to the podcast. A lot of the bands we're going to talk about, a lot of the records we're going to talk about, we've mentioned or talked about. These are huge records. So I think honestly, once we get through this decade, we're going to go do the 2000s. And I think that's going to be a ridiculous challenge. And I think maybe we'll have some that aren't as, maybe ones we talk about as much since it's not as recent. But none of these years, 2019, we weren't doing this podcast. So none of these records were like released while we were, after we started the podcast. So it's still kind of a flashback a bit.
Yeah.
We've not done album reviews on any of these records or anything like that, but we may have done some artist spotlights for some of these bands or plan to in the future. But yeah, I think this was a fun challenge, and we might as well start rolling with it with 2010. For me, there were kind of two records that really stood out in 2010. One being the obvious choice, and the other kind of, I did try to pitch a little bit for this other one, but ultimately we landed on Exoplanet, the Contortionist. That record's just too monstrous to not have win out here.
Yeah. Yeah, it was the didn't catch if you meant to.
Oh yeah, so in Dreams from After the Burial, which is my favorite After the Burial record.
Was that's
sort
mine
of
too.
Yeah, that's sort of the honorable mention here. Pendulum, such a great song. There's a lot of good tracks on that record. But yeah, it was tough to not put Exoplanet here. Flourish, Oscillator. There's just. It's tough. It's tough.
Primal Directive.
Primal Directive.
It's just like that song is just such a hell of a way to start an album. So,
oh yeah, and
then it just doesn't stop the whole way through.
It really doesn't. And we just recently saw them play this in its entirety, which was really cool to see.
Yeah.
And so that was still kind of, that performance was fresh in our head, and it was a no-brainer kind of.
Yeah.
And the Contortionist is just such a huge band for us. Obviously, if you've been listening to this podcast, you probably know that.
Yeah, they're right up there in number of mentions, probably like right behind Coheed.
Yeah, and maybe BT Bam.
Yeah.
But yeah, Exoplanet for 2010, I think, was the obvious choice for us. And if you're listening to this episode and we completely spaced on a record that maybe you think should be higher than Exoplanet, we always post the thumbnail on Instagram, Facebook, whatever. Slap a comment under there and tell us where we screwed up.
Yeah. Yeah, because we had to go back and kind of research what albums came out, because we weren't doing our album of the year list at that point. So we are kind of just kind of quickly skimmed through and found an album that's oh, it's definitely this one. Yeah, but there might be some we missed.
And even from a personal standpoint, I didn't really start doing an album of the year list until 2016, 2017. So I had some, material, so to speak, for the later years in this decade, but the earlier ones we definitely had to really go back and sort of figure out, look at some of our favorite bands, look at, some lists that were out there just to see, okay, where, what all was out in this year and what kind of was the standout. But anyways, 2010, The Contortionist's Exoplanet, I think that was kind of a no-brainer.
Yeah. It was nice to start with an easier one.
Yeah. So the next year, 2011, this one was hard, but it wasn't hard because there were so many great records. It was hard because there really weren't any. I mean, there was one. We did find one that I think it makes sense for this list. It's a great record, but there was nothing to really challenge it. The only thing that kind of challenged it was like Opeth's Heritage record.
Yeah.
That's a decent Opeth record. It's not Blackwater Park. It's not anything that was a major standout for me from Opeth, but it was worth mentioning.
I think that one was also where the Hunter by Mastodon.
Yeah.
That album is probably one of my least favorite of Mastodon's albums. I mean, I still love all of Mastodon's music, but that one's probably like on the lower tier. So yeah, I think.
Yeah. Yeah, so ultimately, what we came up with here was the Human Abstract's Digital Veil record. For me, this is my second favorite Human Abstract record. I think Nocturne is better, but for a lot of people, they disagree with me. This is kind of like the pinnacle of the Human Abstract. Travis Richter ended up doing vocals on this, and this is the record that brought all the original members minus the singer back to the band. If you don't know who Travis Richter is, he was the lead vocalist that took over for Sonny Moore in From First to Last.
Oh, okay. I was gonna say I didn't.
Yeah, and he also played guitar for From First to Last, but he did the vocals on Digital Veil. But bringing AJ Minette back for this record was huge because AJ was the original guitarist. He did a lot of the technical stuff that you hear on Nocturne. So him coming back for this record was huge because he was not on Midhaven, and that album is arguably, a lot of people don't even know that album exists.
Yeah.
So it was huge to have him come back. It's very much a modern progressive metal record. And, with it coming out in 2011, I still think that record holds water and still could be arguably considered before its time. Nocturne 100% was. But,
yeah, absolutely.
But yeah, Digital Veil, great record. If you've not listened to it yet, we did do a Human Abstract spotlight, artist spotlight episode. We talk a little bit more in detail.
I forget the number of the episode, but
yeah, I don't remember either. But it'll be easy to spot if you go check our discography of episodes. But yeah, Digital Veil, Human Abstract, still before its time, fantastic record, and definitely worthy of being considered sort of the spotlight album of 2011. Now the hardest year for me.
This was a tough one, yeah, 2012.
And there's more than just these three that I'm going to mention that came out, but like these three were what made it difficult. Kind of like in third place, I guess, getting the bronze medal for 2012. L'Enfant Sauvage, my favorite Gojira record, came out in 2012. Amazing record.
Yeah, it's solid. But it's still so good and always in my rotation.
But does not hold a candle, in my opinion, to these two records. Periphery 2, or P2 as it's so lovingly referred to by Periphery. In my opinion, that's Periphery's best record.
Yeah, I would agree. P5 is pretty good and P4 as well. I enjoy them, but I think P2 still's like got that something special to it.
Yeah, but despite saying that, Parallax 2 from BT Bam came out in 2012. So just kind of by default, Parallax 2 wins, in my opinion, and I think you might agree.
Yeah.
Although you are a huge Periphery fan, we're both diehard Between the Buried and Me fans, and
yeah, that was a real tough decision to make. But yeah, it's as much as I love Periphery, Between the Buried and Me has just got that special place in my heart. They're like the ones that got me into like the progressive metal scene, really. So I have to give it up to them. And Parallax 2 is just a fantastic album, so.
Yeah, and honestly, I mean, there are people who will argue that that's Between the Buried and Me's best record. I still put Colors and probably The Great Misdirect ahead of Parallax 2, but honestly, any given day, it flips. So,
Yeah.
And just such a quality record. So yeah, I mean, it was tough, especially with P2 being my favorite Periphery record, but Parallax 2 has to win out for me. So 2012 Parallax 2 Between the Buried and Me, that's the one we went with. 2013, in my opinion, was the easiest choice.
Yeah, this one was pretty easy too. Whenever you were like rattling off the names, I was just like, oh.
Yeah. I put down one honorable mention just because Coheed's Afterman Dissension record came out in 2013. And
solid album.
And for me, that was sort of Coheed's return to form. The Afterman records, and both of them together, but in particular, Dissension for me was kind of what got me back into Coheed after a lull with Year of the Black Rainbow wasn't that great. And for me personally, I know some people will argue with that, but it is, I think, inarguable that that's kind of their like worst record.
Yeah.
But for me, the Afterman records were a return to form. That's when Josh Eppard rejoined the band, which was huge. I mean, he's not as technical a drummer as Chris Penny, but for Coheed, like having a pocket style drummer like Josh Eppard, I think just fits their sound a lot better. So I was happy to see him rejoin the band at that time, and just everything about that record, or those two records, that double album even, was really refreshing, like a breath of fresh air.
Yeah, like they're back.
Exactly. But that being said, Altered State by Tesseract came out in 2013, and that's arguably my favorite progressive metal record of all time. So it doesn't matter what else was released that year for me personally. Altered State is the record for 2013. It does not have Daniel Tompkins on vocals. That's Ash. One of their, I forget his last name, but he went on to do Voices from the Fuselage, which is another good band if you've not listened to them before. But just something about the way this record flows, one song into the next, and it's kind of split into like chapters even, but everything flows together as one piece of just fantastic music. It's got that ambient, like outer spacey feel to it throughout, but
it's like real heavy and chuggy at points, but then like the vocals are, it's like clean vocals, and
just everything about that record is beautiful. I have, so this is like a freaking side story, but
that's what we're about here.
So I have a like gift card to do this like float thing. I don't know if you've heard of this, if anybody's heard of this. So basically it's like this weird, like almost like sensory deprivation tank type thing.
Oh, okay. I know.
Where it's like there's some kind of real salty water or some shit that like lets you like float on top of this water, and then they like, they put you in this little tank thing, and it can be completely dark, or you can put like, I don't know, you can do whatever the fuck you want. You can play music through it. Anyways, so my whole like thoughts are like, I want to do this thing, all the lights off, and just listen to Altered State. So like that's while I'm trying to like alter my state of mind, whatever the hell, like that was my whole thing. So I'm totally going to do this, and then we're going to do a podcast episode where I talk about my experience. But
that
it'll
could
probably
either be really cool or really horrifying.
I will tell all, but that could just be part of a general transmission. That doesn't need to be its own thing. But anyways, this record is amazing. It was like, I'm not going to say it was a life-changing record for me, but it's one that I can go back and listen to from start to finish, like, and any given time, and be happy with my choice. Like Desert Island Records, if I can only take one, this is probably the one I'm bringing with me. So it's like, yeah, it's that big for me personally. So 2013, it made most sense. I know you're a big fan of this record as well. Maybe not as much as me, but maybe, I don't know.
I think probably because for me, like, I discovered them much later. So like I didn't discover it like as it was released, but so I don't have kind of like the nostalgia factor added into it. But I feel like for the fact that I've only discovered them in like the last handful of years, I'm like catching up. But
For sure.
yeah, they're definitely up there on my list for bands that I can just constantly have on rotation. Like I can put them on a playlist and not be like, oh, I don't feel like listening to Tesseract today.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. But yeah, so that was an easy one. Moving on to 2014, another semi-difficult one. The choice was kind of obvious once you laid it out, but there were a couple of challengers. Joy of Motion came out in 2014. That's Animals as Leaders. Arguably their best record. It depends on who you talk to, I guess. But for me, I'm kind of like partial to their self-titled just because that's what got me into Animals as Leaders and honestly what got me into instrumental progressive metal. But Joy of Motion is a fantastic record. But that didn't win out. The Amanuensis, I'd always pronounce that wrong. I'm never gonna get it right. By Monuments, arguably their best record, but might honestly be their second best because the new record's really good.
Yeah, their new albums. I was just gonna say, I was like, I don't know. I think I might disagree with you on that one.
So ultimately, what won out, and this is a repeat band for this list. Language by The Contortionist won out. We didn't necessarily want to do repeat bands here, but then at the same time, the whole goal was to say what was our favorite album in that year, and this was our favorite album in that year.
Yeah, and I mean, I think people that have listened to the podcast know enough about us to know that Language is up there, and it was on our like top 10 album lists whenever we made them. So, I think it's probably not too surprising to hear that we picked Language.
Right. And this was sort of the shift in sound, or the beginning of the shift in sound from the Contortionist, going from progressive metal to more of like a bigger blend of progressive rock. So this is sort of, the beginning of the transition for them to progressive rock. And you still get some of the heavier stuff that you have come to know from Exoplanet and Intrinsic, but this is the beginning to their new direction, and it flows really well. There's some really cool moments on this record. I mean, the title tracks are really good. Thrive is a crazy song. Ebb and Flow is amazing. The Parable. I mean, everything on this record is really good. And there's kind of something for everyone in a way. This is still sort of heavier-ish to where, if you have a significant other who may not like heavy music, this might not grip them completely. But I would argue that like the reimagined tracks would.
Oh yeah, absolutely. The reimagined tracks, they sound so good too. I think actually that was one of the ways that I think I was playing that and Colleen heard it and she was like, "Ooh, I like this," and then eased her into the
the heavier
the heavier first version.
I know I don't know which record was Steph's like introduction to The Contortionist, but now The Contortionist is one of her favorite bands, and she likes Exoplanet. In fact, like when they did the like, what was it, like during the pandemic when they did like the live stream of, I think they played Exoplanet in its entirety.
Yeah, they did. That was a cool show.
And it was Steph that was pushing for us to buy that versus like me being like I didn't have to go to her and be like, "Hey, let's do this." She was like, "Hey, this is happening and we should do this." So she's a big Exoplanet fan as well, but I think Language is maybe her favorite record. So it is, I guess, accessible, maybe more so than I thought, but front to back, amazing record. Progressive rock and progressive metal fans alike would probably enjoy this record. If you've not checked it out, definitely do so. I would be shocked if you're listening to us and haven't listened to Language, but
yeah, we talk about it enough.
Right. So just throwing it out there. But moving on to 2015, a record that we've talked about a couple times. And it's just because I really do hold this record in very high regard. But let's talk about some of the ones that didn't make the cut, because this was another pretty challenging year. So Act 4 from the Deer Hunter came out that year. Great record. The Congregation from Leprous came out. The Price, amazing song. I mean, there are other good songs on there too, but great record.
The Price is definitely a call out song.
And then Coma Ecliptic from BT Bam, kind of a polarizing between the Buried in Me record. I feel like
I really like this.
I know you're a big fan. I know like you would even probably put it higher than most.
Yeah, probably. I enjoy because they kind of did the 80s sound before it became like, you know, in the last couple of years it's been like the very trendy thing.
Yeah.
And they did this, you know, in 2015, so well before that started happening, and just like Dim Ignition into Famine Wolf with that cool like synth repeat loop thing.
I really enjoy this record as well. I probably like it more than most, is not more than you. I think you hold it higher than me, but I do really enjoy it. I never thought that it was like super like I never fell into the you know, like all the people that were shitting all over it, basically. Like I never really like, I made my own opinion. I liked the music and I
honestly didn't even know that people didn't like it. I mean, I could understand that they don't like it as much as like Colors or Great Misdirect or something, because those ones just seem like pretty much across the board loved by fans of the band. So like I get that, but I didn't realize people didn't just like straight up didn't like Coma Ecliptic.
Yeah, I feel like it gets a lot of hate on some of the message boards, some of the fan pages and stuff like that, or at least it did for a while. I know some people have come back afterwards and been like, "Oh, it kind of grew on me," but especially when it first dropped, there was a lot of hate for it. But
wow, I'm glad I'm not on those message boards.
But none of those records made it to our number one record for 2015. Because Quiet World by Native Construct came out in 2015. And for me, this is just such a standout record in the genre, period. And the fact that Native Construct then just never made another record, like it was just, here's the one record that we made, see you later.
Here's our gift to the world.
Right. And so it kind of maybe makes it stand out a little further just because this is, you know, the only piece of music we're probably ever going to get from Native Construct. I've likened it to like almost like a Phantom of the Opera prog metal record. Like it's very much sort of in a musical vein in a way. Like it makes you feel like you're watching a stage play, but it's with metal.
Yeah, it's kind of like, I don't know, I get like From Between the Buried and Me, which I, you know, liken them to. It's like a better version of Automata 1 and 2. Yeah, like there's that like rock opera kind of sound.
That's exactly what it feels like. It's like a rock opera.
Yeah, but I think they actually like they did that sound better, which like I know that might be polarizing because a lot of people seem to like Automata, but
it's okay.
But yeah, it kind of falls in the lower echelon for me from BT Bam stuff.
It's good. I think it's better than some of their earlier, like I think it's better than the self-titled record. I think it's maybe better than Silent Circus.
Ooh,
maybe.
I don't know about that.
Automata 2, like the sound that like sort of takes over, like where it sounds like a circus train wreck or some like I don't even know how to describe it, but like I don't know, I kind of clicked with some of the stuff on Automata 2, but and Millions is kind of a good song, like an interesting sort of change of pace song. I don't know. I'd have to really think about it. I think we did a artist spotlight for these guys.
Yeah.
I probably put more thoughts about it in that episode. So if you guys want to go kind of scroll and find that, fun fact, that was the first episode where we actually had to re-record it. Do you remember that? Fun.
Yeah.
We recorded the entire episode and then realized that we like screwed up.
Yeah, I fucked up and I don't know. I must like double tap the record button and like stopped it. And I had a dock over top of the GarageBand. So note to self, need 2 monitors.
Yeah, that was actually hilarious.
I was so mad at myself. I felt so bad.
What sucked about that too was like our first take was like real energetic and real good, and then our second take was just like defeated. Like we just sounded so defeated on that.
It wasn't that we didn't have energy. It's just we were both like sad and upset that we like had to re-record.
And we were trying to remember some of our like hot takes and stuff like that to just like put them back in, but it just like didn't have the same like oomph the second time around. Like it was. So if you do go back and check out that episode, just to hear more about, you know, what we felt about Automata or any of these records, just, you know, keep that in mind. It was a second take, and it wasn't by design to do two takes. So we were a little defeated that day, but whatever. But this isn't about BT Bam. This is about Native Construct, Quiet World. It sucks that they kind of disbanded, but Po Hawk, who was their guitarist, has a solo project, and he actually released a song with the vocalist of Native Construct. We put it in not hidden gems. We put it in Jams of the Week, one of the weeks. I don't remember, but and I don't remember the name of the song off the top of my head either. But it very much sounded like Native Construct, and actually, I saw on a post from either Poe or the vocalist whose name I don't remember, that the song was actually originally written for Quiet World 2, like the album that they were writing before they disbanded. Ooh. So there was going to be a second album from Native Construct. Life happened, whatever led to them disbanding. So this is like sort of the closest / maybe the final taste that we'll ever get of Native Construct, or what could have been if they would have stayed together. So I definitely recommend checking that out. But yeah, Quiet World, amazing record. 2015, pretty good year for music, but that's the standout. Moving on to 2016, another pretty solid year. We had 3 standouts, one that won out, but Everything Was Sound by Silent Planet came out that year. That was a really good record. Panic Room is just such a good song. And everything Garrett writes is just like poetry. So it's a very good record.
I love his vocal delivery. Like it is very like, it has like a very poetic flow to it. It's like kind of it's like spoken word but angry.
Right, angry spoken word. And like that's something too that like my wife Steph, she's not a big like overly heavy music fan, but what she likes about Silent Planet is the fact that even though he's doing harsh vocals, the way he emphasizes and the way he flows and stuff, you can like recognize what he's saying a lot easier. Steph's the type of person that connects with a lyric more than the music, where for me personally, I'm more listening to the instrumentation than the lyricism. But so that's kind of important to her. And if it's important to you, if you've not listened to Silent Planet, I feel like they're a good band on the heavier side, to where you can still sort of grasp what's going on lyrically.
Yeah.
So that kind of sort of backs up your, like, you know, you like his delivery. I feel like it sort of lends to people who are more into lyricism when it comes to music. And
yeah, I think just it's so unique. Like I can't think of any other band that has like those types of vocals. Like,
yeah, not really. I mean, I've maybe come across one or two here and there, nothing I can like spit out off the top of my head, but yeah, overall I feel like they're definitely very unique in the metalcore scene. But Everything Was Sound did not make it here. Neither did Affinity from Haken, which might be my favorite Haken record.
It's probably my favorite Haken record too.
But Act 5 by the Deer Hunter is what made it. I wanted to make sure we had a Deer Hunter record in here. But it was tough because the only records released in this time frame were Act 4 and 5, which are 2 of their best records, but they were going up against some heavy hitters. So
it was tough.
I felt pretty good, and I think you did as well, putting Act 5 here. It's the last of the acts. You know, obviously, if you're a Deer Hunter fan, you know that, you know, they were planning on there being a 6th, and even if you did get the box set, The Hanged Man was going to be the name, and they actually give you a sleeve, and they're like, if we ever do, you know, we'll send you the vinyl. But so Act 5 may be the last, you know, we get in the main storyline. And I mean, it starts off amazing. You Regress into the Moon Awake, just such a good flow. The whole album flows really well. The biggest standout track for me is the March. It's cool, like some of the callbacks to some of the other music, and just overall an amazing record. Might be my favorite Deer Hunter record.
Yeah, I think the March is probably my favorite song by the Deer Hunter. So like, just that track alone, I think is, heavy enough to kind of have it win out over the other ones. But it was definitely a tough decision for sure. But the March is so good.
Yeah, and the new sort of direction for the Deer Hunter is very interesting. It's kind of funky and whatever, so I mean that's kind of cool. And I've seen some people. We talked about on one, I think maybe our last one of our what the heck was the last General Transmission that we did. What was the? Anyways, we talked on a previous episode about how the end of the Sleep Token song, The Summoning, had that like funky groove towards the end, and we went down like that caused us to go down a rabbit hole of us just trying to find something that sounded like that. One of the things that was suggested in some of the like threads that we found of people also similarly looking for the like answers to this, like comps to this, was the new Deer Hunter record.
Yeah.
And I can kind of see that because it is very funk forward. But for me, it's one of those things where I appreciate it. I like the sound. And like, but it's like one of those things where I listen to it once, I appreciate it for what it is, but it doesn't have a whole lot of replay value for me, that Deer Hunter record.
Yeah, it definitely doesn't have the replay value that Act 5 does.
So I almost look at Act 5 as like, and hopefully this doesn't hold true, and I know some Deer Hunter fans will be like, that's blasphemy, but I almost look at Act 5 as like the last Deer Hunter record for their, like, that's true to what their original sound was. Because I'm nervous. I'm nervous about how, and I like what they're doing, and I think it's, it takes a lot of talent, and it's, like from a compositional standpoint, like, they are writing really, really cool, intricate, layered, difficult, incredibly musically inclined songs. So like I like it for that, but for me personally, I was more partial to their original sound, and especially the sounds on Act 4 and 5, 3, 4, and 5 even, because like the tank and like songs off that Incauda Venenum, how the hell that's pronounced. I really like that song. So yeah, I'm kind of, I look at that as like the departure of the original sound to like this new venture. So like I kind of hold that in higher regard, maybe because of that as well. But yeah, great record. Another good year for music, but we're going to move on to 2017, which was not that difficult for me. I don't know about you.
Yeah, not terribly difficult, I guess, but
we put two in the honorable mentions. Probably the biggest standout in the honorable mentions is Clairvoyant from The Contortionist. There was no way we were going to put three not no way, but I mean, Clairvoyant was good. Godspeed's an amazing song. The title track is also a great song. I mean, there's a lot of good songs on that record, but it's not, I think Exoplanet's better. I think Language is better. So, and we also had Melina from Leprous on this. Very consistent record. If you've ever, I don't know, have you listened to that record, Melina?
I don't think so, actually.
So it's, for me, back when, I think 2017 was like the first year that I started doing my personal like album of the year list. For me, almost every song was like in the same vein, like 7 out of 10 ish, like good, has replay value, but not like, there was no major standout track on that record. But my album of the year that year, and an album that I know you enjoy as well, and the album that we're going to sort of spotlight for 2017 was In Contact by Caligula's Horse. If you've never heard of Caligula's Horse, I don't know if we've talked about them much We've probably mentioned them here and there. I've definitely had a couple of their songs on like Jams of the Week here and there. But band from Australia, very much in that like progressive metal vein, similar to a Haken. I would actually say that's probably the biggest comp that I could give them is Haken.
Yeah, I would say so too.
But In Contact, you get your like shreddy stuff going. Like right from the beginning, there's a song called Dream the Dead. That's one of my favorite progressive metal songs of all time. It's amazing. It's clean vocals. They don't do harsh vocals, at least none that I've run into. But just, you get the heavy stuff, you get the shreddy stuff, you get some of the like the more calm sort of interlude-y stuff. You even get some of the chuggy stuff, like the Cannon's Mouth, kind of like the genty sound that they sort of bring into the record. So it's a nice mix of like all of the things that we personally like, from a band that I feel like doesn't get enough recognition. Like, if they didn't have as many monthly listeners and stuff like that, this might be a band that we put on Hidden Gems. But
yeah, the album that they had, Rise Radiant, that came out in 2020 was really good. I love The Tempest. The Tempest is probably my favorite song by them, but In Contact is a solid album, though.
It's not better than Dream the Dead. Nothing on that record is better than Dream the Dead, but that's my personal opinion. But Rise Radiant was very good. I was concerned that they wouldn't, like, with how good In Contact was, I didn't think that Rise Radiant stood a chance, and when it did come out, it actually was better than I was expecting, so it did exceed my expectations. I think it probably made my top 10 the year that it came out. But yeah, something about In Contact. Definitely check that record out if you've not, and check out Rise Radiant too. But 2017, In Contact by Caligula's Horse. 2018. This was kind of a tough one.
Yeah, this one has a little more competition than the previous year, for sure.
Yeah, so basically I leaned towards the record that I put as my album of the year that year, but I also knew that I'm biased in a way because Coheed and Cambria released a record in 2018, and usually when that happens, that's like my album of the year, and it was my album of the year in 2018, but I recognize that Automata from BT Bam also came out that year, and I also recognize that was the year that I discovered Delta Sleep. And Delta Sleep released a record called Ghost City, which is that when it dropped, that's when I discovered Delta Sleep. And that record's incredible as well. So it is tough to sort of, looking back at it, it was tough to say, okay, well, which one of these should win out? But I think ultimately we both kind of agreed that Unheavenly Creatures, Vaxis 1, Coheed and Cambria made the most sense here.
Yeah, it was tough because Delta Sleep, I mean, I only recently discovered them through you. So I, didn't have the pleasure of discovering it in 2018, but just like the tracks like Sultans of Ping and Sans Soleil and
El Pastor,
great
song.
After Image, they're all just great songs. So like, it's a tough one.
That whole record is incredible, and I'll say this again. I've said this many times. Most recently, I think I said it in our sort of like Battle Royale episode where a Delta Sleep record was pitted against a Coheed record, and we chose the Delta Sleep record. If you're a Coheed and Cambria fan and you've not listened to Delta Sleep yet, I feel like you need to go do that. I feel like I just discovered your new favorite, like one of your new favorite bands. I feel very strongly about that, being a Coheed fan and loving Delta Sleep. So definitely go check them out. I would recommend Ghost City or Spring Island. Both of those records are incredible. Twin Galaxies is good too. Everything that they have is great.
Yeah,
so
while you're over there, just keep listening until
just
you
check out their whole
listen
discography.
Anymore.
But Unheavenly Creatures, Vaxis 1, that's what ended up winning out. The Gutter and Dark Sentencer, like those two songs are, in my opinion, top 20 Coheed songs, which, given how vast their discography is, that's saying something. and just because of that alone, I just feel like it's difficult to put really anything ahead of them. There are a couple standout tracks on the Automata double record. Obviously, Ghost City I hold in high regard, but saying that there's 2 tracks on a Coheed record released in the last 5 years that still somehow hold a candle to those original 3 records, that's saying enough to basically have this be the standout record, in my opinion.
Yeah, I mean, I just also like Love Protocol and Old Flames.
Yeah, Love Protocol. I mean, that's a song that I feel like I always lean towards like the heavier, proggier stuff, but like Love Protocol is a great song. The chorus in that gets stuck in my head sometimes. And yeah, so that's definitely worth mentioning. So that's, great record overall. And
yeah, I kind of forget how good this album is. And then I go back and like look at the track list and we're like, wow.
Yeah, I mean, Coheed purists might look at that and just be, hear what we're saying and just be, oh, it's not on the original 3 records, so it can't be that good. But honestly, I feel like this record was underrated in the Coheed community because I feel like this was almost like they wrote this record to appease Coheed fans. Like, that's how I felt about this record. There was something for everybody. There were songs that reminded me of like the first 3 records, or even like the Willing Weld style from Good Apollo. There were poppier songs that, would fit sort of the pop heed, so to speak, fans. So like Vaxis 2 to me was a song that or a record that they wrote to appease, themselves and what they wanted to do. Like that was the biggest sort of divergence from the Coheed sound in a way. So it was almost like Vaxis 1 album catered to Coheed fans, even though a lot of them still hated it. Vaxis 2, we're going to test you guys kind of thing. So yeah, I hold this record in high regard. It's obviously, even though I say, oh, Coheed purist or whatever, I, in a way, still say, those first 3 records are kind of untouchable, but this was close. This was good.
Yeah, it was a solid one. I think, like, as much as I love BT Bam, like, Automata just doesn't really hold a candle to either the Delta Sleep or the Coheed record for this year, in my opinion. So it was kind of, for me, it was in between the Delta Sleep versus Coheed, which I know we had that same matchup when we did the Battle Royale thing. So it's funny that here it is again.
Right, yeah. And yeah, I agree. I mean, Automata had some good stuff. Proverbial Bellow and Voice of Trespass are probably the biggest highlights on that double record. And if honestly, like, we could just say Automata 2, and like I feel like I would put it higher, because I think that was the better of the 2. But yeah, that still doesn't hold a candle. So yeah, Vaxis 1, Unheavenly Creatures, 2018. That's the record. 2019, another difficult one, and maybe one that looking at the list, I'm just like, I don't know how strongly I feel about the record we chose. 2019, the album of the year for me, whenever I like did this, was C'est La Vie by Novelists. And I still hold that record in very high regard. But that did not win out for us here after having a discussion. Astronoid also released a self-titled record, which I think is their best work. Also didn't make the cut. Pitfalls by Leprous, maybe sort of the lowest on the totem pole of the ones that we put in the honorable mentions. Still a great record. Didn't make the cut.
Yeah, this is a competitive year. This was probably the hardest one for me to decide.
Yeah. Periphery P4 was released that year.
I know this P4 didn't hit quite as high for you on like the list of Periphery albums, but it's up there for me. I'd still say P2 is probably my favorite, but then P4 is probably a close second. Although P5 is definitely gaining, so
yeah.
that might switch.
Yeah, but it did not make the cut.
No,
Periphery 4 did not make the cut. What we ended up choosing, and this will probably be controversial, especially with the ones that we just listed off. probably not as many people hold that Novelist record in as high regard as I do. I just, for some reason, really click with that record. I really like it. But Sundowning by Sleep Token. This is kind of the record that put Sleep Token kind of on the map. They had some singles and stuff that I feel like kind of like Jaws was a single that came out before Sundowning that was sort of a song that was getting a lot of plays on some playlists and whatever. But I feel like this record was what started the craze that is Sleep Token. So Sleep Token Sundowning was the record we chose for 2019.
Yeah. It was really tough, and this was one I think we probably spent the most time like kind of back and forth on.
Yeah, we were going back and forth a bit. I mean, I still really, really hold that Novelist record in high regard, but the way that this Sleep Token record sort of flows, This Night Does Not Belong to God or whatever that song is, just beautiful way to open a record, and then right into The Offering, which is one of probably the most popular Sleep Token songs, period.
Yeah, it's one of my favorite of theirs. I mean, they've got so many good ones, but that song is just so catchy.
Yeah, and even like songs like Bloodsport, like the way the record closes, that's a great song. Higher is a good song. Levitate's a good song. So just from a consistency standpoint and just sort of how this was the record that sort of put Sleep Token on the map, in my opinion, I don't think they were nearly as big. I mean, but I mean, This Place Will Become Your Tomb, whenever that record dropped, I feel like was what sort of solidified Sleep Token as being a player in progressive music. But I do think Sundowning was what gave them their start into the sort of the spotlight with the song The Offering. I think that was sort of the big one that took off. And it was Jaws was in a lot of my playlists, that single, which came out before Sundowning came out, but
that's a good track too. I wish they would have like thrown it on the album. I don't know why they didn't.
Yeah, but that was like it for me with Sleep Token. That was the only song I was listening to by them. So this was also the record that sort of put Sleep Token on my radar in a higher capacity.
Yeah.
Which is another reason why I consider it sort of the most standout from 2019 for me personally.
Yeah, I didn't actually listen to this album in 2019, but this was the album that I discovered them with. It like just popped up, I think, as like a recommended thing for me on Spotify, and it just like caught my eye, and so started listening and was like, holy cow, what is this?
Yeah, I followed them back when whenever I was listening to Jaws, so before this record. So because I was following them, like Release Radar, like put The Offering in there, and I was like, oh, this is really good. So then that's how I went and listened to the whole record, and yeah, so I'm fine with it. I'm happy with the decision. I do.
You don't regret?
If you've not listened to C'est La Vie by Novelist, though, definitely go check that record out. It's really good. It's the last one with their, I don't know if he's technically their original singer, but the singer that's on that record is no longer with the band. He's with a band called Salem now, which is also a good band. So check them out. It's a 3 instead of an E.
Yeah, I was just going to ask. I thought there was some weird character in it.
Yeah, so SAL3M, but yeah, I mean, I'm pretty content with this list. That kind of concludes the list there. I mean, to run back down, so we had Exoplanet by The Contortionist, Digital Veil by Human Abstract, Parallax 2, Between the Buried and Me, Altered State by Tesseract, Language by The Contortionist, the only one to repeat here. Quiet World by Native Construct, Act 5 by The Deer Hunter, In Contact by Caligula's Horse, Vaxis 1 on Heavenly Creatures by Coed and Cambria, and then Sundowning by Sleep Token. All great records. I'm sure there's going to be a lot of people that disagree with us. I'm sure there's probably some bands that we didn't even think about adding to this, or records we didn't even think about adding to this. Definitely send us a message, slap those records into the comments underneath the thumbnail for this episode on social media. We'd love to know what we missed. And I think it's going to be fun to do this for the 2000s, like 2000 to 2009. Yeah. I feel like that's going to be so hard because I'm just thinking in my head, like Good Apollo, Messengers by August Burns Red.
Yeah, I feel like our list is going to be by and large a bunch of metalcore bands.
Probably that's what we were listening to back then. It was a lot of metalcore. I mean, early 2000s, is that enough to even throw in like Hybrid Theory or Meteora? Probably. Pretty close. Probably. Yeah. I don't know. But that would be, I mean, those were huge records, Linkin Park records early on. Throwing another August Burns Red, but Constellations, Colors, Between the Buried and Me. I think 2009 was Great Misdirect by Between the Buried and Me. There's gonna be some tough years.
Yeah, that's the one that I think that selection will be much harder
because it'll be Constellations. I think was also 2009, so it'll be like,
yeah,
wow, that's gonna be fun. And that's just we haven't started research on this at all. We're just throwing these out there. But I think all the first three Coheed records are in the mix.
Man. Yeah, they would be.
That's going to be a fun one. So I think we'll do that next. Not the next episode, but the next version of this. We'll do that next, the 2000s. We might even go older. That might be fun. I mean, do like...
Yeah, pick stuff like that are like our parents 1990.
Yeah, the 90s. I mean, I've been jamming a lot of 80s tunes lately too. So I mean, we can even jump into that. Go as far back as the 80s. It doesn't have to necessarily.
The 90s one's just gonna be a bunch of boy bands.
No, just grunge, man. The grunge era. Yeah, that'll actually be fun. Maybe we'll get because my wife Steph is a big 90s music fan. I might have to consult with her for that one. But yeah, hopefully you guys like this type of episode here. This is kind of just a new thought that we had, and we just like to do like random shit like this. Yeah, make lists, and it's just kind of fun.
Yeah, we were actually like brainstorming another episode, and then this idea just
this was on a whim.
Let's go with this.
Yeah, completely on a whim because we were like, we were taking notes for something completely different, and then we're like, you know what, we're doing this instead, and it was fun. It was It's just cool to look back at stuff that that we've listened to and. Try to come up with any type of definitive lists, pitting things against each other and stuff. It's always fun.
Yeah, it's fun having the discussion about it and like kind of the banter back and forth and trying to like jokingly argue our case for a particular album or band or whatever.
For sure. But yeah, hopefully you guys enjoyed this. Again, let us know in the comments on any of the posts related to this episode what we missed. If we got one wrong or if you fully support this list because it's just so perfect, it's fine. It's fine to let us know that as well. But thank you guys so much for listening. Keep an eye out. We got a lot of episodes on deck. And thanks again, guys.
Thanks.